In this daily drop, we're going to talk about some of my producing considerations and tips when sound recording in small to no crew situations. So let's go. Okay, so fortunately or unfortunately, I have been producing content now for over 2 decades. And you learn things as a producer when you do that. I'm also a DP, and sometimes I am the entire crew. And that is not, unfortunately, unusual nowadays. And one thing I will say right off the bat is if you are budgeting and planning for a project, you need to do everything you can to hire a professional sound recordist. The amount of stress that will be taken away from you and other people on the crew when you have somebody dedicated to recording sound is so important. And if I have to fight for it, I will. If I don't get it, which is sometimes the case, then I'm in the same position many of us are, which is I'm now responsible for not only picture, but also sound, which is arguably far more important than the picture you're capturing, because if the sound quality is bad, then it's pretty much a game over in terms of taking the audience out of the story. As soon as you hear that little click or that pop, there's an anticipation that happens from the audience's standpoint that that problem's going to happen again. We'll forgive a mediocre to sometimes horrible picture, but we for sure will not tolerate bad sound. So get a sound recordist if you can. It is not a huge expense, and let me tell you, if you're doing corporate work, you're doing small commercial work, you really need to make sure that that is in your budget for the production. Sometimes in documentary, you can't get away from not having a sound recordist, but again, really try to get one if you can. If you can't get a sound recordist, what do? Probably my biggest piece of advice for everybody that I'm teaching small to no crew production to is listen to your location before you look at your location. It's not always that we get to scout and choose where we're going to be doing a shoot, but it does happen. It happens more so, at least in my case, than not. And part of that is, again, pushing for that, asking for that. Sometimes you'll actually show up at a location, and if you have the time to check it out beforehand, please do. One time we looked at a theater type space, and there was a freight elevator in the back of the theater, and we stayed there for a half an hour to listen to the patterns. We of course asked if we could make sure that that freight elevator was not happening during the event, and the answer was no, so we 86'd that location. Then there is the situation where you have the HVAC system and you want to ask, can we either turn that off completely during recording, or can we set it to a consistent level? Then you can get room tone and you can handle that later on. So again, listening to before looking at your location is very important, and then asking the right questions. One time we were in a convention center. Convention centers not only have the spaces that you're in, but sometimes the room that you're in is really not designed for video and sound recording. And why? Because there are hallways around that space where they are taking equipment. The people who are doing the catering are pushing carts with silverware and cutlery and things like that. So that's also really, really important to figure out whether or not you're going to have any major sound issues inside of that space. So it's just, again, really listening to the location, asking the right questions, and making sure that when you get there the day of, that you're setting yourself up in the best way possible to get the best sound that you can. You should also, if you're in a neighborhood, figure out what the patterns are for school buses and for garbage trucks and things like that. And those are all really important things. Last tip for today. If you are responsible for the sound yourself, do what sound recordists do. Take your keys, put them in the refrigerator, because you want to unplug that fridge if it's nearby, because when that compressor kicks in, you've lost a take. All right, don't forget to, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.